What's up, everybody? It's Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. And recorded a video, played my first Modern League now that March of the Machine. Yeah, March of the Machine has dropped the new Phyrexia set. And I was kind of trying to brainstorm what I wanted to try out. There's obviously new cards in the shadow color combinations. Got to try out something. At the very least, we get content, right? So I was thinking about what I wanted to play, and one of the ones that struck me as like at least plausible is where Invasion of Azgol. If you haven't seen this one yet, it's a black and a red for a saga, or not saga, siege. Siege, not saga. Bad saga. Good siege. Black and a red for a siege. When it enters the battlefield, target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and loses a life. So an edict effect on the front half, kind of like Shieldred's edict that some people have been testing out recently. And then it's got this little 4 down there. That means it's got like 4 defense points, I think is what it is. But either way, if you knock off its defense, either through direct damage spells like Lightning Bolt or attacking it, when it reaches 0, you can cast the backside for free, which is this Ashen Rider. This ad is really getting in my nerves, which is this Ashen Rider over here. And the Ashen Reaper, not Ashen Rider. That's the big like exile permanent thing, right? So Ashen Reaper is a 2/1 menace. At the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on Ashen Reaper if a permanent was put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn. So whether that be killing a creature, cracking a fetch land, cracking a bauble, whatever. All of them go to the graveyard from the battlefield and would trigger Ashen Reaper. So I figured, like, why not? Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Because, curiosity and all that jazz. Where did my video go to? Video is this one. This one. Yeah. So I decided to try out 2 copies of this new Siege, this Invasion of Azgol. One in the main, one in the side. I didn't want to like overboard them because I wouldn't play a bunch of edict effects anyway. I'm just kind of testing out how this feels in kind of that Shieldred's Edict flex removal spot. To compensate for this, as you know, if you've watched any of my Grixis stuff recently, I've been a big fan of going up on Kroxas and like Ledger Shredders and cutting back on Dragon's Rage Channeler. I decided to go back up to the Dragon's Rage Channelers to try to maximize the invasion. So I'd have more sequences of like turn 1 Channeler, turn 2 invasion, and see kind of how that progression worked out. My initial concerns about the invasion are the 4 defense points or whatever are a lot. I thought about going up on lightning bolts to try to like directly hit the invasion, but kind of decided that the fact that lightning bolt didn't kill it in one shot and a lot of my small creatures don't kill it in one shot means I would have to like burn an attack and a bolt to defeat it. And I really don't want to put that toward or that many resources towards it. So I decided instead to keep the bolts down, just replace one of the unholy heats with it since the heat can't hit it anyway, and go from there. So we'll see how it plays out. In the sideboard, I threw a second copy of Invasion of Azgol, just try to see it a little more often in matches where my opponent's more likely to go in on like a bigger creature early, or maybe like against mURktide and stuff like that. We can potentially snipe a mURktide with it. So yeah, let's just get going, see what happens. See if there's any interesting games. So this is game 1 of match 1 coming up. All right. Game 1, match 1. We are on the draw. Got an okay opening hand. We've got like Channelers and Shredders and a Terminate. Opponent leads on Copperline Gorge with an Epicure, so immediately thinking some sort of like artifact burn deck. They Chatterstorm. So Chatterstorm usually means a bushwhacker deck. Speak of the devil. So we kind of have to go on the defensive route, just try to soak up a bit of damage, get a couple creatures on board. They don't have a lot of ways of killing our stuff. They kind of just want to like go wide and swing around. So if we can kind of reciprocate that a little bit by also going wide, and we did see Ragavan exile an Ancientsaur, whatever. It's this big dinosaur that you can convoke things, and it comes in with like 2/1/1 counters for every creature that convoked it. But thankfully, we have the card Terminate in our deck, and that looks pretty good right here if they do find one of those. But instead, they just find a Bushwhacker, and I'm sitting here thinking, all right, well, they can't possibly attack because they die on the crackback. Okay. An opponent just decides to scoop it up there because we can just block 2, take 6, kill them on the crackback. Sideboarding. Definitely took out the invasion in this deck and took out like some Thoughtseizes, a whole bunch of Ragavans. Brought in Spell Pierces, Flusterstorm for Chatterstorm. Brought in, I think I brought in an extra Dress Down for Bushwhacker and like my Engineered Explosives. I'm just trying to like mitigate the go wide as much as I possibly can. So like Spell Piercing early and often, Flusterstorming early and often. They do get a rebirth here, so a little annoying, but it's not like some crazy amount of go wide that we can't deal with. They do end up having the Bushwhacker, so we get to trade, or not trade, eat a dude, kill a Bushwhacker, take some damage, but at the end of the day, we got a big Shadow down, we got Drawn in the Lock and a Dress down. So, like, as long as we don't have anything crazy happen, we should be okay. I was not expecting my opponent to make this attack because, as we can see, if we just have a removal spell, they're dead. And with 5 cards in hand, the likelihood of us having a removal spell is fairly high. So, I think it was like a rough matchup, but I think our opponent made a few kind of questionable attacks. Round 2. Okay. So, I'm on a 1-lander. Ideally, I would like to get the Dragon's Rage Channeler down first and be able to like cast a spell and improve the chances of hitting a land next turn. The downside of that is there are like 3 Valakut decks that I really think about. Number 1 is Amulet Titan. If it's Amulet Titan, then I'm safe to get down this Channeler because even if they have an Amulet, they can't also have an Azusa or a Dryad next turn. So I know Thoughtseize should be live the turn after that if I don't hit the land. Arboreal Grazer would be whatever. But I know that they couldn't go off on me next turn if it's Amulet Titan. The second option would be like one of the Bring to Light Scapeshift decks, where they do have Dryads, but they also have Renin 6. And the worst thing that could happen to me is if I play this Channeler and my opponent plays second land, green source, Renin 6, down tick. Because obviously I could kill the Renin 6 with the Unholy Heat, but then I like lose the ability to Thoughtseize. I lose my Channeler. I spend a spell on a Renin 6. Like, I'm way behind. The third option is, like, traditional Scapeshift, but I couldn't tell you the last time I saw traditional Scapeshift. I don't think they play Renin 6. So, yeah, I'm assuming it's Amulet Titan. So, I'm like, all right, I'm going to play out this Channeler. Not Amulet Titan. Emotional roller coaster, to say the least. Opponent fetches for a green source. I'm like, okay, Renin 6, 1000%. Cast and explore. Oh my god, I'm safe. Play a mountain. Cool. Lightning bolt. Dang. We're back in the dumps. But we hit our second land. Thoughtseize our opponent. They do have a wish and a lightning bolt. Decide to go ahead and take the wish. I just hope to hit a couple land drops or one more land drop so we can get down Shadow around Lightning Bolt here. And we do get to have Drown in the Lock. If our opponent ends up casting a couple spells, makes a couple fetches, then Drown in the Lock should be able to counter like a Primeval Titan or maybe even a Scapeshift. And they do play the Wish before the land here, so I get to get value out of this Spell Pierce, which is huge. That means that this Drown in the Lock can just stick around as like a hard counter spell. They're 2 mountains off of Valakut being alive, but just Valakut being alive doesn't really matter to me. Because they're like 3 turns from there from killing me, and they can't deal 6 in 1 turn to kill Shadow, so we're just kind of aggressively trading with whatever we can. Third Wish nabs an EE out of the board. I'm not going to lie, I was not really expecting EE there. Wasn't expecting a Wish, but okay. Let me mention this real quick before I continue on. So I dashed the Ragavan last turn, which taps me off of Drown in the Lock. My opponent had no cards in hand at the time. They could not crack EE, so I dashed Ragavan to put them down to 1. Let me talk about why this is important and okay. First off, my opponent has got 6 cards on, or 6 lands on the board. That means if they do top deck a Scapeshift, it doesn't do anything. They would be able to get a Valakut and 5 mountains. Valakut only triggers when the 6th mountain enters. So if you have a Valakut and 6 mountains, each mountain sees every other mountain enter, it goes off, 18 damage. But if you only have 5 other mountains, each mountain only sees 4 other mountains instead of the prerequisite 5, doesn't do anything. If they top deck like a Dryad of the Elysian Grove, that's fine because they don't have a land to follow it up to kill my Ragavan. So I would be able to attack with the Shadow, force either the EE or the Chump block, and go from there. Probably like Unholy Heat, the Dryad, play out the Ragavan, hold up Drown in the Lock. If my opponent does top deck like a Titan, that's okay. Let me tell you why. They tap out, they go get 2 lands. Let's say they go get 2 mountains. They have 6 damage on board. Valakut, 4 mountains on the battlefield, 2 more entering. They can either point 6 at me, put me down to 1. I untap, Unholy Heat the Titan, attack with Shadow, they die. They can point 6 at the Shadow. I untap, Unholy Heat the Titan, dash the Ragavan, they die. They could choose not to cast the Titan for whatever and sit on EE, in which case they blow up the EE, I play the Ragavan, hold up Drown in the Lock, they die. There's not a card I can come up with that beats me from here unless they just have like 2 straight nut top decks. But because they play the Primeval Titan, I don't know why they decided to scoop there. I guess they thought the Valakut was like going to do something and it didn't, or they thought I was going to scoop and I didn't. So either way, sideboarding against Scapeshift, just board out some of the cheap removals like a Fatal Push, a Bolt, and stuff, and go a little bit more proactive. Opening hand, got a turn 1 Ragavan. They had a Bolt. Luckily, we had a second Ragavan. We've got Channeler. They just have a bunch of Search for Tomorrows. Dryad's fine. I've got Terminate and Drown and stuff and spells and things. Drown on my upkeep to give myself the best chance of finding like another land. Do end up getting Delirium online. And now that I've got the second land, I'm just going to hold up like Dress Down and Drown in the Lock. Drown in the Lock can counter a Scapeshift. Dress Down can stop a Titan, and then I can untap and like Unholy Heat. So they do end up having the Titan. Since they don't have 6 cards in the yard, we'll just go ahead and dress down the Titan. Let ourselves untap and kill it off. Since they're down to 1 card, I want to like hold on to this this Drown in the Lock as best I can. And since I've got the Thoughtseize, and I know I'm going to be putting my opponent on like 1 top deck for potentially the game. Obviously, taking Wish is huge, so they can't Scapeshift, and they whiff on the draw, so we end up getting out with that one. Old Scapeshift with like Thought Scour, Gurmag, Angler, Shadow was one of the closest matches to a buy that you could possibly get. Like before Veil of Summer, before Dryad of the Elysian Grove, all that stuff. When we were just on like Thoughtseize, Shadow, Gurmag, Thought Scour, Bauble, Wraith, like you had to try aggressively hard to lose that matchup. All right, so this is match 3, I think. We have a hand on the draw. It's like pretty slow, but pretty powerful if the game goes past like turn 3. So we could risk it, throw it back, look for something more proactive, but not knowing what I'm up against and knowing I've got game 2 and 3, I'm kind of okay keeping this hand that's solid against a reasonable chunk of the field and just like hoping it's not the other chunk. So of course it means it's burn, and this hand is very, very sketchy, if not horrible. But they do suspend a Rift Bolt, which usually means Eidolon on turn 2. Thankfully, that was not the case. So maybe these Croxas can do some work. Maybe we can just start like jamming these, get a couple cards out of our opponent's hand. Like, even if they burn me, if each of these Croxas nabs a spell, I feel fantastic. Unfortunately, they are able to like empty their hand here. But fortunately, that does mean that they have emptied their hand here. So I'm at 4 life, which means I'm probably not dead to the next spell. And if my opponent whiffs for a turn, then I can get down a Shadow or 2 and kind of maybe steal this one. Hope it's no Boros Charm. So, decision time there. I could play out 1 Shadow and hold up Drown in the Lock and just kind of like hope my opponent doesn't have or doesn't top deck a Boros Charm. Alternatively, I could play out 1 Shadow, hold up, or okay. Option number 1: play out both Shadows, hope my opponent doesn't draw a Boros Charm, and I've got Drown in the Lock for like anything else. If they do find like a Lightning Helix, then that doesn't matter because they would reduce my life total by 3, grow my Shadows to 12 12s. They'd go up to 20, but I'd be dealing 24. So the only thing I died to is Boros Charm. They've already used 1 of them. So 3 draws in 49 cards, or 50 cards at the time, that kill me. The other option, like I said, is play 1 Shadow, hold up Drown in the Lock, and then I'm not dead to Boros Charm, but I am dead if they draw running Boros Charms, because I give them 2 draw steps, in which case they have to draw 2 consecutive Boros Charms to kill me. If they drew an Eidolon, how would that be? They drew an Eidolon. I can't attack. Yeah, so I would have to counter an Eidolon. So an Eidolon first into a Boros Charm would also do it. So they could draw either Eidolon or Boros Charm into a Boros Charm, or I play out Double Shadow and make them draw exactly Boros Charm in one draw step. So I decided to go with the Boros Charm in one draw step. They draw Goblin Guide. Goblin Guide gets drowned in a very small, shallow pond, and we sneak away with that one. Sideboarding against burn, just bringing out a bunch of like Thought Seizes. Board in the extra invasion in case of Sanctifier on deck. Board in Flusterstorm, Spell Pierces. A lot of people are really big on Ragavan in this matchup. Personally, I'm not like a huge fan of it. Mainly because it turns on like Searing Blaze, and I kind of hate that. But either way, if opponent's going to give us this trade-off with this Eidolon here, we're absolutely taking it, especially after a Goblin Guide gives us a land. So we get to Flusterstorm for free. If they had just attacked with the Goblin Guide, I'm probably trading with it as well, but obviously we don't get to test that out. I don't want to Skull Crack. I'd rather just like hang out. Gets a couple burn spells down, which is frustrating, but fine. It's like as long as we get Shadow down. I wonder if I was supposed to think about that more. So I bobbled them and I saw Eidolon on top. And I ended up dashing the Ragavan to exile the Eidolon. Yeah, I should not have done that. So what I should have done is cast out the Ragavan. They'd be at 15 life. Is that right? Yeah. Cast out the Ragavan. Cast out the Shadow. They're at 15 life. Shadow's a 3/3. Or Shadow's a 10/10. I'm at 3 life. They untap, play the Eidolon. I go to my turn, cast the Invasion of Azgol, take 2 damage off the Eidolon, go to 1. The invasion triggers, they sack the Eidolon and lose a life, taking them from 15 down to 14. And I've got a 12/12 Shadow because I'm at 1 life, and a 2/1 Ragavan for exactly lethal. So I 100% should have just cast the Ragavan instead of dashing it and let them keep that Eidolon. And that would have been just like guaranteed guaranteed lethal with known information. It doesn't give them a chance to like top deck a burn spell. But I mean, we get there, but we could have gotten there guaranteed instead of gotten there with hope you don't top deck something. But on to match number 4 against Everos. Last time I played them, they were on Enchantress. Does not look like Enchantress, but that's fine. We do have like Unholy Heat if this is Hammer time. If they Stone Forge on 2, we can maybe like Thoughtseize a Cauldra or a Hammer or something. Looks like they're just going to clog the ground up instead, so we'll take whatever kind of trade-off we can get. This is a mindset adjustment I'm having to get into a lot in this matchup, is like Ragavan, for whatever reason, we put a lot of value on Ragavan in this kind of matchup. Not because Ragavan is good, because like we know it's not good in this matchup, which is why we bored a bunch of them out. But for whatever reason, in game 1, when you have a Ragavan, your opponent's got like a Midnight out, or a Stone Forge, or 1/2 Stone Forge or something sitting there, we're like terrified to attack into them 9 times out of 10. And it just makes no sense not to. Like, this card is terrible in our deck. And if we have the option of turning it into a free removal spell, or not free, 1 mana removal spell, then just take the removal spell, right? Not crazy here. But regardless, trade off Ragavan for a Gingerbrute. Get my Channeler down. Just trying to buy a little bit of time. This Fatal Push on top is pretty important because this means that I've got 2 kind of clean answers for the 2 halves of the Saga token. 2 Saga tokens. I just know I need to like take out the Sentinel and then I don't have to get taxed anymore. And hopefully like Fatal Push takes out 1 token, Terminate takes out the other. And I should be able to kind of tempo a little bit. Obviously, if they had another Saga, that would have been unfortunate. But all right, Invasion of Azgol on top. Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what we got with this invasion. Cool. Get a Cauldron. That's pretty good. Goodbye, Stoneforge. Now we have to make the tough decision of whether we attack the invasion or attack our opponent. And this was kind of my concern with the invasions, is just like, why would I want to deal 2 attacks, 6 damage to the invasion when that's 6 damage closer to killing my opponent? I think if they were a little bit easier to deal with, I'd be more inclined. But regardless, against Hammer, boarding out a whole bunch of Ragavans, board out some Thoughtseizes, board out a Kroxa, and then boarding in like EEs, the other invasion, dress downs. Sure, there's something else I boarded in. We'll figure it out. So the good old Sigarda's Aid, Esper Sentinel start, just kind of hoping they don't have a hammer right away to filter away a whole bunch of lands. I probably should have just attacked there. I was kind of scared of them just playing hammer and chump blocking and like my attack wouldn't matter. All right. Stoneforge, but not equipping up the Esper Sentinel, which is really nice. All right. Who's ready for a funky play? So I'm okay casting the Bauble pre-combat because I know that I can control whether or not I flip Delirium. But I don't want to cast anything else until like my second main phase because I don't want these channelers to have to attack when my opponent's got a known hammer in hand. Okay. So this was a little bit of an unconventional line, and I'm going to walk through my thought process. So my opponent is attacking with an Inkmoth Nexus and an Esper Sentinel. I've got 2 1/1 channelers. I know they've got a hammer. And I know they've got this Surge of Salvation. The Surge is pretty good. The hammer is more annoying, but whatever. Can't do anything about it. My options are A, cast the Drown in the Lock, and my opponent surges, and hopefully that Delirium just lets me like throw a channeler in front of an Inkmoth. It gets hammered. I lose my channeler, but I get to at least like kill an Esper Sentinel. They draw a card. Actually, no. If I do that, then both of my channeler on the left dies. My channeler on the right lives, but nothing on their side dies because Surge of Salvation has a funny little line of text at the very bottom of it that says, prevent all damage from red sources. Well, Dragon's Rage Channeler's red source. If my opponent has a Spell Pierce, I'm like dead regardless of what I do. or not dead, but in a really, really bad spot. So, option number, whatever option we're at now, I can cast Dress Down. Dress Down does not kill anything for the most part, but would remove the infect from this Ink Moth Nexus, which means if they hammer it up, it's dealing normal combat damage. I get to keep my Channeler around because I can just not block it and take 11. 11's not killing me. Maybe I can trade off with this Esper Sentinel and turn on Drown in the Lock. And then we're talking like actual interaction. Maybe like I talk about it a ton, and somebody commented on one of my last videos that they appreciated it. Is drowning the play to win or the play to not lose line? Like, if I give up most of my board for something that doesn't really matter in the long run, is that playing to win? And I don't think it is. I think playing to win is improving my board state, like getting down a shadow, getting a Drown in the Lock online, hopefully, because we get to trade off with this Esper Sentinel, and creating like a very, very big roadblock for my opponent. It's like now I don't care about the what's it called? The Ink Moth Nexus attacking. I've got Drown and Spell Pierce, so I can fight over some stuff. Fire up Ink Moth. All right. There's the hammer. Here's the live Drown in the Lock, which they have the Windswept Heath, but we put the Esper Sentinel in the yard anyway. So we don't care about the one infect off the hammer. It's just the +10/+10. So we can, if we can stop that like we do here, then hey, we're putting ourselves in position to just have like a lethal attack next turn with a Shadow and a Channeler, maybe. Like we're at 1, Shadow's a 12/12 through Channeler, and looks like that's what happens. So really cool example there of, like we always say, the play to win, not play to not lose. Like, what's the point of living if you can't win from that position? All right, so on to match number 5, our good old buddy mURktide. Take the threat. They got to consider a bauble. We've got a Kroxa. So we're not in a terrible spot. Ragavan's a little annoying, but hey, can't do much about it. We know they've got an Otawara chilling around in hand. Channeler hold up Bolt. So now if they want to get Ragavan in, they have to be able to kill our Channeler and dash Ragavan. And if they're able to do that and hold up a counter spell, then their top decks were nutty. Could go for the EOT Lightning Bolt, but I really don't want to flip over Delirium. I know that I'm going to be just like hard casting the front half of Kroxa here. So I don't want to like accidentally or put a bolt in the yard, play Kroxa, and be forced to attack into this Channeler. I know that I've got the bolt, so if they block, I can double up the Channeler and the bolt to kill the mURktide. The problem is I don't want to do that, because if they don't block, now I'm forced to like use my removal spell on the Ragavan or just take the Ragavan hit, both of which are really terrible options for me. Unfortunately, they iteration and find a lightning bolt, so I have to kill the Ragavan. and find a way to deal with this mURktide. Fortunately, though, if you saw, my Mishra's Bauble saw Unholy Heat on the top of their library, so I am praying that they don't have an answer to this Ragavan, and I'm able to just like dash it in, knock off that Unholy Heat, and kill the mURktide with that. Nice. So opponent's got 2 cards, up to 3. I know one is an Otawara. We're down to 6 life. So double bolt, obviously a big consideration. Escape Croxa, see if we can get some cards out of hand. Spell Pierce is pretty good. Don't want to take more damage if I can avoid it, because I really don't want them to have like Dash Ragavan hit a bolt off my library or something. All right, so we do get to find a Shadow here. So that's a lethal threat that dodges like Unholy Heat. All right, cool. Win that one on to game 2. I do have to mention at this point, we're 4-0 in matches, 9-0 in games. If you haven't been keeping up, we have not dropped a game this league, and we're playing for the trophy, the perfect 5-0, 10-0 trophy. Very inconspicuous if you haven't been paying that close of attention. Some pretty close wins, some pretty flunky wins. One thing I need to do a better job of against mURktide explicitly is not play around Blood Moon so much. Like, I had the option on my turn here to just fetch a basic swamp, fetch something else, and just like terminate the Ledger Shredder. Just get it off the board, be done with it. And if my opponent went to their turn 3 and played a Blood Moon, then I could go to my turn. I'd have one of my basics, dash a Ragavan, and be able to like hold up Drowning Lock on their turn. And I just didn't. I was like, no, go to your turn. You get a Ledger Shredder, but I just like gave my opponent what could have been an unnecessary Ledger Shredder trigger, because I didn't want to just like kill the kill the Shredder on my turn, even though I had the ability with that hand to play around Blood Moon, because I could get the swamp, I could dash the Ragavan to get the treasure and make the blue. Like, I was fine, just didn't. Also, we get to dress down as Spyro here, so that's pretty fun. We don't have Delirium yet, but we will after this dress down, so we couldn't kill the Channeler. Doesn't really matter if we just get to kill it on their turn, right? All right. Hand's not terrible. Obviously, seeing Expressive Iteration off the top of their library is terrifying. But we also have an Expressive Iteration coming off the top of ours. So it's just going to be a fight to see who's got the better iterations. Should feel in like a reasonable spot right now. And yet, because it's mURktide, I don't. So we got Counterspell for our invasion, which is fine, because that means we get to resolve our iteration. Terminate's good. I don't know what they told you in school, but terminating mURktides is pretty aight with me. More iterations. Oof. This is kind of when I feel things run off the tracks with mURktide. Like, once they start chaining iterations, it is really, really rough, because they get so many digs at like more considers or mURktides or counterspells or whatever, and they're able to start chaining together spells really, really well. Like that iteration, finding an EE and then finding a counter spell in hand, being able to dash the Ragavan, protect it. I know they've got an Unholy Heat, which is why I scoop here. I just don't think I can beat like Unholy Heat my Elk and dash Ragavan again. This is game number 3. Keep a removal heavy hand. Do find a shadow, so we've got a threat. Being on the play is obviously nice. Or no, that was repeated game 2. Sorry. This is game 3. I'm over here trying to show you all things you've already seen. Opening hand, we've got a couple threats, got some interaction, and I can show you exactly where I lost this game. Wait for it. Wait for it. Here. Here, I lost this game. Why do you think I lost this game here? I'll give you a clue. I didn't cast Spell Pierce. And I should have. I should have just taken the opportunity to keep the tempo, keep my threat on board. And I didn't. And now, like, I've dug myself a hole because both of my threats have gotten taken out pretty easily. I've got some interaction. My opponent's able to kind of take the advantage here because now I'm trying to answer their threats, but they've got counter spells. So I absolutely think that was like a really big turning point, is having counter magic, having the ability to save my threats and just like not doing it. If I'm not using my counter magic to save my threats, what am I using it for? Also should have just played Giganta here. Like, what am I holding up Giganta for? I'm not going to sneak it in through a counter spell. I don't want to draw 2 more lands. So I should have just said, hey, I've got the mana for Giganta. I'm going to slam Giganta. My opponent untaps with mURktide. So be it. If they counterspell my Giganta, cool. They would have had a counterspell for it later anyway. But I give them more draws for more counterspells. Also, why am I not like drowning the locking this? I just think I played this last game like absolutely terribly. All I'm thinking is like, oh, I need to save these counter spells. But it's like, what am I saving these counter spells for? If my opponent has a mURktide, they can just get the mURktide down through Drown in the Lock. Dress down to try to stifle the monkey, hold on to the Drown, draw some more cards. But yeah, it's like I brought in these counter spells for things like Blood Moon and Unlicensed Hearse and cards that like wreck me in the long game. And there's no reason that I shouldn't just like aggressively use them to protect my things in the early game. Like once you get to the long game, then this is what happens, where they start like chaining together iterations and eventually find mURktides. We don't have enough like hard grave hate to keep them off of mURktide or keep them off of Delirium without having a hearse down on turn 2. Like, why didn't I dash the monkey there? What if I dashed the monkey and exiled that Shredder or the Pyro or something? Here's a mURktide. We We do have a Terminate for the mURktide, though, so, like, we're not in terrible shape. As long as they don't have a counterspell. Which they don't. And then, like, why am I not attacking with Giganta here? Like, am I afraid of them doubling up Pyro and a Bolt to kill my Giganta? Cool, then they don't have an answer to my Ledger Shredder out, or the Channeler outside of this EE. They'd have to pop that, which means my Shadow is safer. But we've been the Shadow because we're cowards and not attacking into Spyro. And I guess I'm like, watching back on these matches, it makes me think that I'm like afraid of giving them extra turns with Spyro and Spyro tokens. So I'm not attacking to not put Spyro in the yard, which just makes the whole situation worse. Because now they get like the extra turns that I'm not attacking, and then they're going to get Spyro tokens on top of that. So my not attacking just turned their like 3 turns into 7 turns, which is absolutely ridiculous. The land part here isn't helping a ton. We've drawn a few more lands than we really want to. They're starting to chain together iteration, so you know that's a really bad sign for us. Blood Moon is fine. Invasion, not so much. I really don't know why so many people are on Spell Snare nowadays. Personally, I think that card's like really, really subpar, but power to you if you're finding success with it. I really feel like if I find a Kroxa, I might be able to get out of this. But obviously, Kroxa and more fetch lands are not the same thing. And my opponent being able to double spell into the Shredder is very, very, very bad for me. Especially if my plan involves resolving something. Do finally find a Kroxa. Just hope we have the ability to escape it under a counter spell next turn. Or they just have a mURktide. That was the second option. mURktide. Yep. So we flooded out super, super hard that game towards the end there, but we shouldn't have been in a position to really like make ourselves flood out. We should have been a lot more proactive at protecting our threats and establishing a dominant board position earlier. I just play way too passively against mURktide, and I've got to get out of that habit. Like, I shouldn't be afraid of them bolting me out. I should be afraid of them counterspelling me out or mURktiding me out. And the best way to stop them from mURktiding you out is establishing a solid aggressive board state before mURktide lands. And then you can either like force the mURktide into a chump situation, or you can run your opponent's resources down earlier and then deal with the mURktide. I also think I want to change up my sideboard plan in that matchup a bit, like keep in some Thought Seizes, since it does answer like mURktide, pulls counterspell out of hand, iteration, whatever the case may be. But also just takes out early threats, so I can save like my terminates and stuff for the mURktide. So what do we think of Invasion? I thought the Edict effect was cool. It's something we've been kind of messing around with in Dimir recently with the Shieldred's Edicts. But I don't think there's realistically a time that I ever want to spend a turn, or worse yet, 2 turns attacking at an invasion or attacking at a battle. So the only times I'm going to be able to one shot one is if I have a shadow out or like a huge ledger shredder. And that just means that there's like 4+ damage I could be putting at my opponent that I'm choosing not to. And I'm trading that 4+ damage for what's likely a 3/2 with Menace, assuming it's going to trigger at the end of the turn. And that just does not at all seem worth it to me. Um, Also saw in these matches that Dragon's Rage Channeler, I've been off of the card for a minute, and this league kind of reconfirmed that with me, because I found myself like in positions where I had to play suboptimally because I didn't want Channeler being delirious or attacking into something intentionally, or attacking into something uncontrollably, I should say. Um, so that was awkward. And then the clock on it. As much as people don't want to accept it, the clock on Channeler is just like completely irrelevant. A 3/3 just doesn't matter in like 90% of matchups. The games that we won were like shadow beatdowns when we had to race. Um, we got a little bit of value off Channeler against decks like Hammer Time, where we really wanted to filter into more draw spells. But with how often we were double spelling, like Ledger Shredder probably could have just served a similar role. Plus, if we were playing one of the other builds that I've been on, those channelers would just be more interactive spells. So you can make the argument of like, oh yeah, channeler found more removal. Well, realistically, channeler would have just been more removal. So keep that in mind when you're making those sorts of diagnoses. Diagnoses? Diagnoses. I'm not a medical professional, so clearly. Other than that, yeah, I got to work on the mURktide matchup. I felt decent about it on my last build of Shadow, but clearly with this build, not working. Also, Spyro in that matchup did not help because that made the invasion of Azgol look absolutely horrendous, but couldn't predict that one. So be it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. This is the first of many testing out some of the new March of the Machine cards. If you have any suggestions of things you'd like to see tested out, leave a comment down below. Love to check those out. Otherwise, hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch you back live later. Adios for now. Also, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit the subscription button down below. Yes. Adios for now.